My name is William D.C. Clark. I'm a lifelong resident of Miami-Dade County. I was born just 3 blocks east of this location where we're doing the actual filming. That location is 11th Street in Northwest 1st Avenue in the city of Overtown. I was born in 1956. I'm 65 years young. And even though I only spent the first 2 years of my life here in Overtown, a lot of my relatives, most of our relatives, stayed in this community for years. I'm of Bahamian descent. My grandfather and grandmother on both sides of our family came from Exuma, came from the Bahamas, and settled here in Overtown. My grandfather came over here in 1917. So we've been a part of this community for quite a while. We moved to a place called Scott Projects. Now that I remember because we stayed approximately 10 years over there in Scott Projects, but at the time, the word project denotes a certain way of living. However, during that particular time, a lot of black professionals lived in Scott Projects. My father was a teacher at the local school, Ponciana Park, which I attended. And from there, we moved to Ocola Lakes area. I went to Miami Central, was awarded a scholarship at Miami Central. Went to a school by the name of Northern Iowa University, where I became only the second African-American captain in the school history. But while there, since we had so much culture shock, African-American young men coming from the projects, coming from the inner city, going to Northern Iowa, obviously it was a big culture shock. But it's there, ironically, that I learned more about myself. And I did so by being questioned by the locals in Iowa, but why would I leave Miami to come there? You know, they were asking me such questions about my culture, about my history, my heritage. And it was from there I became a seeker of knowledge of our history, our heritage, our culture. So much so when I got back to Miami, I became a school teacher, coach. I soon became a firefighter and paramedic for Miami-Dade Fire and Rescue. And it was when I entered the fire department, I met a couple of young black men who shared the same thirst for wanting to know more about our history. We began to study at a local bookstore by the name of Afro-N Books and Things. And that became our hub, our headquarters, our landmark, we used to call it. The proprietors there were Earl and Ursula Wells, assistant superintendent and school principal. The wife was a school principal. So they welcomed us in. We met there almost daily. And we realized that our people needed to hear more of the history. And so we formed a group called I Am Miami, which the acronym stood for the International African Movement. Now that was rare back in that day, particularly here in Miami.
I am Richard W. Harris Jr., and I too was born right here, Overtown, Florida, on 3rd Avenue and 9th Street. Our home, our house is no longer here, but my grandfather pastored the historic Mount Zion Baptist Church. Because of urban renewal, we had to move and relocate because of I-95, which is right here. I-95 goes directly over where we used to live. I have pictures of the house with me. Urban renewal was something that the government did around the country. And on the surface of it, it sounds like it was good, something to create business or create industry within the black community. But in fact, it did the opposite. It decimated our communities. So many blacks had to move out. Well, we had gained economies of scale, we had gained comradeship, we had gained community spirit. And in this town, Overtown was a very lively community, okay? From hotels to businesses to churches, civic leaders, all kinds of people lived in Overtown. But when I-95 came, it spread us out. So people moved to Allapattah, Arcola Lakes, Carroll City, other places where Overtown was a living, breathing, dynamic area. Even though I grew up here or was born here, my family, when it came from South Carolina, we first moved to Coconut Grove. And our house was next to the Andersons, which was Thelma Anderson's house, who is now Thelma Gibson. So our families known each other ever since we moved here. And with the work that Father Gibson did with my grandfather, they did a whole lot for civil rights, economics in this community. And so I moved, went to Allapattah Junior High, went to Miami Jackson High School, one of their rivals. I went off to college too, to Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas. I too became a captain of the basketball team. But my thoughts, even though we moved from Overtown, we were back here a lot because my granddaddy still pastored Mount Zion. And so for me, there's a rich history of Overtown. My grandmother taught at Booker T. Washington High School. And later on, it became a middle school. Now it's back to being a high school. But she retired from Miami Jackson High School as an English teacher. So I have so many fond memories of Overtown, some of the people. I remember I have pictures of my 2-year birthday party sitting on some ponies in the front yard, right across from we lived at the parsonage, and right across from the church. And every time I hit that expressway right there, I think about going right over my house. There were so many names back then growing up in the civil rights era. And we actually belonged to the same fraternity, the amazing Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, okay? And I know he moved here, I believe, in 1935, and I think he was a graduate from FAMU. And our chapter in Miami started in 1939, okay? And in 1949, I have pictures of the Grand Bosses or the international president coming down to meet with the chapter here, which is Sigma Alpha chapter. And they were planning our grand conclave here in Miami for 1951. And so in 1951, our grand conclaves, which are now in the summertime, back then they were in the winter, because we didn't have access to some of the public accommodations. We had one really public place that we met in 1951, I think that was Dennehy Auditorium, and the rest of the facilities we used were like local schools, local high schools. And so that's why those events were held during Christmas time when students were out of school so we could meet. Now they are being held during the, like this year, our grand conclave would be in July in Charlotte. So I know he was a member of the fraternity, and I happen to be bossless of our chapter for like 4 years. And his history is throughout our fraternity house and Omega Activity Center. So he is well thought of by our fraternity. He has accomplished a lot. And I knew him for association with what he did around, just Dade County and the city of Miami. This is only my second time coming in this facility. I call it the Black Police Precinct. This is where City of Miami Police Department, all the blacks met. This is where their patrols started from. This is where some of the people they arrested came. This is where the first I'm going to call it Black Municipal Courthouse, was established. And of course, this is where Judge Thomas sat and presided over many cases. And a lot of the cases were, I believe, drunk driving and things like that. And even, and I'm going to say this, even beyond the 1950s, I know police officers in the city of Miami who were in the 70s and 80s, when they pulled white drivers over, some of the time they told them, you can't arrest me, you can't write me a ticket. This is in the 70s and 80s. So there was this belief that blacks should only deal with black citizens, black police officers only deal with black citizens. A lot of what you needed as a black person in Miami happened over town. This is your police protection. This is, he was our first black judge. You had so many prominent pastors and so many churches, different backgrounds. And so Miami, Overtown was truly a hub for pretty much anything you wanted to do in Miami. You had entertainment, you had restaurants, you had police, you had schools, and it was just all the things that you would want to have in a community were right here for you in Overtown.
Overtown was self-sustaining, and it was self-sustaining simply because we couldn't go outside of those boundaries and be with anyone else. Black people, the residents of Overtown and other black cities. So you literally were forced to come together and fend for yourself. Well, white America, America in general, we were under the guise of segregation. There was not integration during that time prior to the late 60s and Martin Luther King's Civil Rights Act. So in a sense, we were forced to fend for ourselves, provide for ourselves, and all of the life-sustaining things that we needed to survive, we were forced to do it on our own. And in a sense, that wasn't too bad because we were able to do so. I happen to be married to a young lady by the name of Stephanie Chapman. She's the granddaughter of D.A. Dorsey, who is the founder of Overtown, per se, along with a few others. And just hearing that oral history, which is very important to us. That's how I learned about Judge Lawson. He was born in 1898. And like I said, I was born in 1956. So I did not know him personally. But what I did hear about his legacy was that he integrated Harlover Beach. Blacks could not go to, quote, white beaches. So we yearned to find a place that we could go and have a picnic, outdoor event, and a place to swim. And here in Miami, as in other major towns, white America, under the guise of segregation, didn't allow you to swim in a public pool, didn't allow you to go to a beach. And I can remember as a kid hearing about what he did, and I juxtaposed that to when I first started swimming at Virginia Key Beach myself as a youngster, and I understood the significance. So like I told you earlier, I belong to a group who studied history and local history, which I'm very much a part of, with most of my people living in Overtown when they first got here from parts unknown, and being married to a person who's directly related to the going-ons in Overtown and Dorsey Park and things of that nature. It led me to knowing about his legacy, about his impact, which not only included the integration of Virginia Key Beach, but it also brought in, for instance, if a prisoner or someone being accused of a crime came before a judge, before Judge Lawson, he was sent to a white courthouse, and it was absent of his peers. He was judged by others who did not look like him. It was Judge Lawson who actually changed that rule. He fought against it, he advocated against it to where being elected or selected as a municipal court judge, it was the first time in history that a black man presided over black people who came before the criminal court and had a jury of their peers to judge him. Now that's, to me, that's very significant. That's very significant because think about it. It's just like Emmett Till. You're accused of a crime. You don't have your day in court. In the case of Emmett Till, they killed him. But imagine all of the hundreds of thousands of blacks that came before such a court and was rendered guilty before they were rendered innocent. When you step toward in front of him, you had the same chance if you were innocent to get that case thrown out or found innocent in that particular trial and jury. So his significance, not only to Black Miami, to people in general, I think is paramount to what we see today. I mean, we have a chance to go into any court and prove our case. And if you have the evidence to prove it, you could walk free and clear. I don't know how much more significant you can call that, but I think it's very significant. It's paramount to what we are today. America say we're supposed to be a just country. And those of us who, like yourself and others who follow the judicial system, we understand that we still got ways to go. But he at least created a pathway to where we can hope that we have a fair trial, our peers judging us. We present the evidence. If the evidence is good enough, we have a chance to clear our name. I think that's very significant.
Well, he alluded to Howell Beach, and I knew that, I think in 1943, my grandfathers and others had the first ever weigh-in in the United States, and it was in Howell Beach. And my grandfather came from South Carolina, where he was run out of South Carolina by the Klan. And they did a weigh-in in Howell Beach until the police came and told them they could no longer be there. So we ended up going to Virginia Key Beach, right? Virginia Key Beach has very strong currents there. This is the beach they gave us. We lost so many children and kids to the bad currents in Virginia Key Beach. On the corner of that area is a water and sewer treatment plant. So we swim in currents that are going to perhaps kill us and bad water, okay, that we're playing in, okay? So these are the kind of things that we had to make do of. My mom was a teacher, and at that time, black teachers made exactly half of what white teachers made. So how are we going to make a living, okay, on half the salary? Our books, most of our books were not new. They had stamps in them from other schools. Okay, we got secondhand books. And even now, let's fast forward to 2022, where our governor doesn't want us to learn about slavery and things like that, okay? And so so these things are still happening in different ways. And how are you going to tell me that we don't want my daughter or whatever to know about the horrible things that we did, but at the same time, there's voter suppression, okay? Some of the first marches in this city were to the courthouse for people wanting to vote. And I would say one of the best things about this community and Judge Thomas is the support he had from other people. People supported him in what he did, okay? He can go to churches and speak. He can go to the community for support. He talked about D.A. Dorsey and his significant contributions to this town. To have a judge, somebody you can come to and believe that there's fairness, is a huge deal. Before that, you was like, I have no chance. You might as well kill me, okay? I have no, people would say, I want to have the mercy of the court. What is that? Okay? And before you have people to look like you, you just really there just hoping that the worst doesn't happen to me. Okay? And in this town, from what I remember seeing, I had so much fun here. And our leaders at that time would do things to make sure children were safe, children had good schools, et cetera, et cetera. And the fact that you can have a judge that you can come to or have a judge visit schools or visit churches, that's hope, okay? There's no price for hope, okay? And we talked about this place being opened in 1950. In 1951, when they had the Groveland 4 case, for example, those guys were falsely accused of raping a white woman, which they did not do, okay? Thurgood Marshall came here to raise money. He came to Mount Zion Baptist Church. And my grandfather went to the City of Miami Police Department, talked to the police chief and the commission to provide protection for those people who were coming to Mount Zion on December 13th, 1951, to raise money for representing Thurgood Marshall and NAACP representing the Groveland 4. 2 weeks later, Harry P. Moore, one of the executive directors of the NAACP, his house was bombed. He died, his wife died later. So these are the kind of conditions that you had to work against. And so when you saw somebody like Judge Thomas, you saw fairness, okay? We still have a cross at my house now that they burned in my grandfather's house because just being a civil rights leader. And what they would call a house. And back in those days, they did bomb little children. They didn't care, okay? I don't know how many death threats he got, okay? He being Judge Thomas, for doing what he thought was right, okay? When you stood up as a person like him, you wanted to know that when you look back, it was other people behind you. And he had people, particularly in this community, behind him. And I think that is so important, as opposed to if I ask you today, if something happened over town, you, D.C. Clark, who've been a part of this for a youngster like me, so which names would you call today? Back then, there were so many names, so many people, doctors, dentists, teachers, pastors, from different walks of life. Overtown is so much different. And you asked me about urban renewal. That's what urban renewal did for us. It made our communities worse. It made our communities scattered, okay? And so I'm so thankful for people like him, okay? Other people in this community who did so much, and we all rallied around each other, okay? And it's so, in the sector of law enforcement, judicial circuits, had it not been for him, I don't know. It's crazy enough as it is now, okay? And things are supposed to be much better, and I'm going to say on some fronts, it probably is. We have access to more places, but it's because of people like him, because of people like Father Comer, because of people like Father Gibson, because of people like D.A. Dorsey, because of people like Reverend Graham and so many pastors and Dr. Simpson, so many people that can. Dr. Simpson was my doctor. Was your doctor too? Okay. These people, Dr. Shirley, these people followed Dr. King around. Okay. And it was great, but there were some scary moments also. Okay, because it seemed to be different set of rules for Black America, different set of rules for white America. Okay. And a lot of times they were not punished for things that they did to us. And so we were at the mercy of majority America.
Brother Harris talked about the activism of Judge Thomas. You know, laid the foundation for some of the accomplishments that he's done. But I think about that myself. I'm an activist. I've been very active in the community. I've been trying to push the envelope so that blacks can enjoy more freedoms and get more things under their belt. But I'm looking at this project right now. I'm looking at your contributions, your group that's still trying to push the envelope. See, many of us get too comfortable and we think that we've gotten all that we've got. But he mentioned Judge DeSantis, who's trying to negate our vote. He's trying to negate our historical significance. He's actually trying to push back time where we couldn't talk about history. And so we have to keep fighting. We have to continue to do the things that you and Moab are continually doing. Why? Because it's not over. The fight, the struggle continues. And they still got fight. We still got some things to fight about, right? And so the significance of what you're doing right now to rehash Judge Thomas' accomplishments and the things that we've all benefited from, don't take that for granted. And that's just a pull up to you. I know you don't, because you wouldn't have the group that you have. I know you don't, undertake and mistake your significance. But more of us got to become more active. You understand me? I'm running for commissioner in one district. I'm doing that so that we can elevate life as we know it for the residents there. That's the only reason I'm doing it. I'd rather be on a boat somewhere fishing, deep sea fishing. You understand me? But it's significant that you have me and this brother and his history and his family, because you can do a story on just his family. Obviously, being a part of D.A. Dorsey family and the significance of my father in the community, it's significant that we are sitting here together. That's not by chance. Something spiritual going on here. You understand me? So I greatly appreciate you inviting me. I will continue to take the lessons learned by Judge Thomas. But think about this as well. You're talking about teacher salary being equal. He took that on. Just think about that for a moment. Think about the climate that he did it in, where you could lose your life for saying the wrong thing. You can lose your life for the activism that he displayed in a heartbeat, but he continued to do it. As a black professional, I'm a retired firefighter paramedic. We had to fight certain things within the system. So when people ask me about the fire department and how was it, how is it? The fire department is a microcosm of greater society. You got good, you got bad, you got racist, you got liberals. And so you have to deal with that when it comes, because they were spitting in people's food when I got there. You understand me? But when I left, there was a lot more respect for black males than when I entered into it. And I'm proud to say I had something to do with that. Personally, me and others had something to do with that. So, again, the struggle continues.
Yeah, and in actuality, I have a picture. It's 1973. You being a firefighter. My grandfather was a commissioner at that time, the only black Dade County commissioner, Reverend Edward T. Graham. And they fought for a lot of things. And one of the things they fought for and got was a fire station in Model Cities, right over there on 27th Avenue. Dewey Knight, who was at the time assistant county manager, but Dewey Knight had a lot of influence on things that happened in Dade County. And so, I think the mayor at that time was Jack Orr, and I have pictures when they were doing a tour of the then new fire station, right, which still is there on 27th Avenue. And the irony of it is, while my grandfather was vice mayor, George Orr died in office, effectively making him interim mayor. So you would never see anywhere written that Miami had a black mayor, a metro. It was Metro Dade County back then, but you won't see it, okay? And so I don't know how long he was interim for, probably not long, okay? But you have people like a Dewey Knight who could make things happen in terms of the administration of Dade County, which the courts are part of administration, okay? The court system. You had, at that time, just one commissioner at Miami-Dade. Now there's 4 black commissioners, okay? And so the fight will never end. The fight is on all fronts. And he probably had a huge, huge fight at the time because he would have been the only one, Judge Thomas. But thankfully it was here where this probably felt like home, here in Overtown. Right. Overtown was, I remember Sonny Wright. Sonny Wright had a Sunday store over here. And while we were supposed to be in church, we saved the money we were supposed to put in church to go buy candy from his store, okay? It was just so festive, Overtown was. I remember people like Les Brown, okay? I remember the first time I got on a boat, it was at Virginia Key Beach, and Butterball saw my granddaddy and said, Reverend Graham, you want to ride on the boat? And so the first boat I ever got on in Miami was for Butterball, okay? And so right now we could throw a lot of names that had a lot of influence in Overtown, but now we can't do it. It has changed so much, but because of him and his inspiration, it inspired other people to become attorneys as such. And the judgeship is a little different. A lot of times you have to run for that office or be appointed. So those are not like guaranteed, but I'm sure there was others who wanted to follow in his footsteps, not just to be a judge, but to be fair, to give hope to others, to be a trailblazer so others can follow. And one of the things I say every morning is, I hope when people see me, they see Jesus in me. So sometimes people are inspiration to others without even knowing it. It's like you watch the history or a story of Jackie Robinson, these little kids. How many people did he influence? He didn't know all those kids, but they wanted to be just like him. How many little kids like he and I ran around Overtown back in the late 50s and early 60s? A lot of us, okay? And it was actually a pleasure to live here, Overtown, until it was time with, again, urban renewal, and we were forced to leave. But there was so much pride here, Overtown, Coconut Grove, Richmond Heights. And I don't know that we'll see it again, because this phenomenon hit the country. It divided a lot of black communities. But getting back to him, because you can only be first once, and he was our first, right? You had to carry yourself in a certain way. You had to have a certain character, because everywhere you went, people looked at you. And many people, there was a lot of envy and jealousies, and some people would hope that you would fall, believe it or not. And so you had to be very careful about what you did, who you associated with, what you said. And even if you said the right thing, there were people who still would come after you to try to detract from what you're doing. Now, I know he was from Ocala. Some of my relatives are Ocala. They're here now because they got run out of Ocala, okay? I don't think that's his case, but some like Dorsey Miller and others, my Uncle Willie Ford, they were run out of Ocala. They came to the house and said, these guys, tomorrow morning, they had to be gone. Because of the way he carried himself, the way he conducted himself, how he embellishes our 4 cardinal principles: manhood, scholarship, perseverance, and uplift. And he embodied all of those. And he is the kind of person that you would want in any organization that you belong to. He set a different kind of standard, okay? He was somebody that the United States could look up to, not just Brothers of Omega Psi Phi fraternity, okay? And so he is one of the illustrious members of our chapter, our local chapter. And back during his time, when you look at the members who were Sigma Alpha chapter back then. It was a who's list of this community who belonged to Sigma Alpha chapter Omega Psi Phi fraternity. Now, I don't know where he pledged. He may have pledged Upsilon Psi at Florida A&M, or he could have pledged here. I don't know that. I mean, but he was probably, he was one of the early guys, because again, our chapter here was only started in 1939, and so, but before my time, okay? But here's a person that we honor, that we look up to, that we highlight, and say this is the kind of person an Omega man should be. All of his accomplishments, his character, his impact on this community, his impact on Omegadom. I mean, he's the kind of person that if your daughter was getting married to somebody, you wanted to marry somebody like that, okay? So in every way, he embodies what an Omega man should be. If you didn't know anything about him, just the way he carried himself, the way how distinguished he was, he'd be a person that you would say, I want to be like him. For instance, when we spoke earlier, and I told you that Nelson Adams was, he lived in our community. There was something different about Nelson Adams. As far as the older guys in my neighborhood, he was just distinguished. The way he carried himself, he was just a distinguished individual. You knew he was somebody, okay? Oftentimes, people would say that about my grandfather. You looked at him, you just know that he is somebody. What is somebody, okay? What kind of characteristics does somebody have? Somebody of power, somebody of influence, someone in a leadership role. You just knew he was in a leadership capacity just by the way he walked, the way he spoke, the way he, I didn't know him like personally. I wasn't in his circle. I'm sure my grandfather was, but I just know that he was and still is a very, very well-respected person. And when you leave this earth, the thing that is carried with you the most is your name. And so when you hear his name and all of the good things that he did, and we would never hear all of them, okay? Even in his lifetime, he couldn't tell us all the things he did, all right? And some were more significant than others. When we talked about the teachers and him fighting for teachers' salaries, I remember my mother and many other school teachers when I was young, she took us out of school because the teachers went on the strike for pay. And they met for days at the Miami Regatta, where they used to have boat races on Key Biscayne. And so he's part of the fight of people who couldn't fight for themselves. He was part of that fight for people who didn't have any place else to go. So I am so thankful that you have a person of his moral standing that was the first in this position. The way he presided over this courtroom, it could have been done a different way, but he chose to do it in an honorable fashion, in an honorable way. And for that, he will always be well respected in my eyes. We all know that things happen in law enforcement, things happen in the judicial system, things happen a different way with respect to justice. And many times those people who are moneyed people, a finding goes a different way, a ruling goes a different way. And it's so pleasing to know that his representation, he will be remembered for his honesty, for his leadership, and for things of that nature. And you know, we all looked up to him and wanted him to do well in this community, and he did.
It was apropos. It was supposed to happen. When I think of Judge Thomas and doing the research that I've done on him, I just think about the personal sacrifice. Right now, we're still fighting for freedom, justice, and equality in America, right? You got DeSantis trying to take us back. You got a president, the former president, trying to send us back to a day and time where we were 3/5 of a man. I mean, this has actually happened in real time. We're fighting so that we can teach our children our history in public schools. That you cannot say gay, you cannot say black history, you cannot say anything that's untoward in their minds in public schools. That's an affront to everything that we stand for. You have to have not only courage, but you have to have something within you that says, I can't wait for somebody else to do it. I gotta do it. I know I'm a judge. Yes, I want to protect my livelihood. Yes, I want to, like most black professionals today, I want to protect my salary, my comfort zone. But he went outside of that comfort zone. He didn't wait for somebody else to do it. He did it himself. And I'm sure there were others with him. I'm sure there are others, came along, just like there were others with Martin Luther King that are very rarely mentioned. But the mere fact that we as black professionals today could sit here and say, well, I don't want to do it simply because I might lose all that. And that fear is somewhat justified. I understand it. But we're still fighting a fight that if we don't do it, we're going to be wiped off the face of this earth. It's just history alone.
I think it's more than courage. I think when you get to that point, the fear factor is gone.
Yes.
I think you're spiritually led, and you're going to do this because of this cause, and it's the right thing to do, regardless of what other people think. For some reason, this charge has been given to me, and this charge I'm going to keep. Okay, and so he understood, being in this position, that it carries some other things, some other dangers and risks. And he factored that in, as well as other leaders. When you take on a position like this, you know people are gonna come at you. And he withstood everything, okay? And it gets to a point where you're numb to all of the detractors and the distractions, the detours, okay? So I believe that to get here, he took so many detours because this was his destiny. God prepared him and developed him in other facets of his life to sit right here. And one of the things I could say that he probably relied on too is so many other people who kind of put a wall around him, insulated him from some of the things, as well as other people who had to be insulated. At the same time, they came together. And so I don't know if we ever see that in Miami again. The support that he had, the courage you alluded to, the fact that I'm going to do this for the cause for my people. And I don't think he was interested in making history. He was doing this because it's the right thing. And as far as the naming of the courthouse, I actually think more buildings around this should be named after African Americans, okay?
Long overdue.
Long overdue, okay? And so I'm so appreciative to be here, and maybe others would think about what we have to go through as a people today. And I retired from the county, but I teach at a private school, and I teach them everything. If the governor DeSantis came here and told me I can't teach this, man, what are you going to do? What does your bill say? You don't sit here and tell me that because of your children and other people's children that they should not feel guilty about what their ancestors did back then. What about what you're doing today? What about the rights you are taking from us right in front of our faces today? How are we supposed to feel? You only care about your ancestors. What about ours? So we're supposed to, you don't care how we feel? Right in our faces, you're taking our right to vote, making it difficult to vote. And so these, in some instances, things may be worse today than they were back then. Okay? You want to monitor all the precincts?
They have the right to fire the supervisor of those precincts if they think some untoward things are happening. The Republican Party is doing this. So that struggle continues. Just going back to Judge Thomas, not only did he have to be insulated, but his family, those supporters, those who are close knit to him. I can imagine having to talk with his wife and his children about their safety. And believe it or not, some of us have had that same talk even today, because there's some of the things that you try to push, are not cool with the powers that be. I have a mentoring program today, DCS mentoring program that I hold every weekend. This is going to be a part of their lesson, this discussion that we're talking about. So I'm starting with me first, okay? Why? Because I know they don't have a clue. I know that you asked 9 out of 10 people who Judge Thomas was and his accomplishments, they don't know. So since we can't do it in school and we fail to rely on that oral history component that we once had, everything I learned about Overtown, remember I was only 2. Everything I learned about Overtown, I learned it through oral history. So we have to bring that back. And we have to charge ourselves, those of us who know, with being the purveyors of that oral history. It's exactly what you're doing right now. You're filming us. You're going to put that component on film and you're going to show others. Well, we have to do that through our daily lives. Why? Because I think part of the problem that we have with the behavior that we see out in the street is because we truly don't know or respect who we are as a people. We truly don't know and respect the sacrifices that were made. One of the things that I tell my kids to do, I mentor ages 7 through 17. One of the first things I tell them, sit with the oldest person in your family. Get a recorder, get a notebook, and I want you to write every significant thing that person tell you, bring it back here and discuss it. So that not only you learn, we learn. And I think we have to get back to that oral history of sharing this information. You're doing an excellent job. You and your group, we're putting it on film and reaching wider audiences. But I guarantee you, and you say young people, but anybody. I guarantee you, if you ask 9 out of 10 people who Judge Thomas is, they couldn't tell you. 9 out of 10. So for those of us who are in the know and are privy to this information, all the while this brother was talking and you were asking a question, I'm thinking, man, what a mighty lesson that's going to be on this Saturday.
I am privileged to teach at a private school today. And I have a Black History program I do. It runs like 6 weeks. And when I get to that school, Mr. Harris, what are we going to learn today? It goes beyond teachers. And the first part of the year, I had to sub for another teacher. The name Muhammad Ali came up. Okay, and I grew up 1 block from him the 4 years that he was here. And the students didn't know who Muhammad Ali was. So whose fault is that? It's not the kids' fault. It's the adults. We didn't do what we were supposed to do that night, their assignment was, go look at the bio for Muhammad Ali. We're going to come in tomorrow, we're going to study it, and we're going to watch a short film on Muhammad Ali. So it's an interactive course that I run for like 6 weeks on various people, various things. So they'll come in and tell you, yeah, I knew that Mansa Musa was the richest man ever in the history of the world. I knew Benjamin Banneker designed Washington, D.C. I knew that the clock in London is named after him. I knew this, and this, because you gotta take time and do it. And the good thing is, when they want to know what they're going to learn today, and it's a good mixture. I mean, it's entertainment, it's athletics, and a lot of times it's about people, but it's about errors, it's about other places, not just America, where things go on. And there's so much to learn. And there's a thirst for me, and for some reason my students have acquired that thirst to want to learn more. And it's so gratifying and rewarding when I get to the school for young people to want to learn about their culture. And you can't, in a 6-week period, you can't get it all. So, I mean, we've gone from Black History Day to Black History Week to Black History Month, which is good, but it should also be something year-round, and it should be something that starts in the home first. And so many people have fallen short when it comes to starting the education process in our homes. And I get that. And families don't typically eat dinner together anymore, okay, all these kind of things. But we gotta make time for our youth. We have to make time to raise our kids and not let TV and song, et cetera, raise our kids. We need mentoring groups. And I told you earlier, I think you mentor people without saying a word sometimes. Your actions mentor people. What you do, people are watching you all the time. You never know who's watching you. And so it's incumbent upon us to teach, to reach, to sacrifice for our youth. And I tell them, we bring in police officers. We tell them, one of our visits actually was supposed to be here. We didn't make it yet, but and we had police officers come in to talk to our youth about how you should conduct yourself. What happens when you're in a car when you're pulled over? You know, even if you're not the driver, even if you're a passenger, there's a lot of things that we have to teach because it's different for us. And so those stories of Mississippi burning and all that kind of stuff, even though that might have happened back then, when I was coming out of high school here, when all those letters came to my house from Mississippi State and Ole Miss, my mama said, you can forget about it. You are not going to school in Mississippi, okay? And
Mississippi still burning.
yeah, I mean, so it's something we have to recognize. We can't let it go. I don't care what this governor or other governors say, okay? You telling me now you're trying to tell me what my rights are, and you're going against the Constitution. And so when I tell my kids in school in history, I say, well, the preamble says, we the people, by the people, for the people. And I ask them a question, say, what people are they talking about? And when I keep asking the question, what people are they talking about, then they're like, okay, he's asking more than what this simple words say. Okay, so there's so much to teach, so much to learn.
The first question I would have on that is, what is the justification? What is their justification of that? And then you could really get into the dynamics of how they felt about us, how we live, how it was separate and not equal. You understand the foolishness that they tried to feed us. But we have to get into that dividing line of black versus white, and the controlling line of how they felt about us, how they controlled the purse strings, and no matter what we did, without people sacrificing their lives or their careers to turn that entity around. Why? Because people still feel that way today. They still trying to justify it. If they could take us back, they'll still be doing the same exact thing.
What do you think is the justification? What was the justification for?
That they were superior and you were inferior, no matter what you did, no matter how much of a professional acumen that you displayed, no matter how smart you were. In many cases, our teachers ran rings around them. I mean, I look at a situation like Miss Pittman at Ponciana Park, for instance, how she grabbed a bunch of inner city schools of kids, and those kids came out of that just flourishing all over every place. You understand me? That those victories are not talked about. But we, in some cases, we are like afraid in a lot of cases to bring that kind of thing up, to even explore it, to deal with the bowels of it, because it's ugly. It's ugly, and we don't want to rehash it. But we have to rehash it to make sure that our foundation is still firm going forward. Think about if he didn't do what he did, Judge Thomas. Where would we be? Where would we be just on that issue alone? Not all of the other things that he did. You understand me? Just on that issue alone. That means Judge Thomas was dealing with a plethora of issues. Most of the issues that face this black community, particularly this one. You understand me? Over time. Because again, my father was a teacher, his father, your mother was a teacher?
Well, my mother was a teacher, and she was the first principal at American High School. And so she went through a lot with that. She was a principal at Miami Shores. She went through a lot of stuff with that. But my mama was tough. My mama ran Little League baseball teams overtime when she was pregnant. Okay, I couldn't beat my mama run until I was 9th grade. My mom was tough, okay? Like I said, my grandmama was a teacher, my aunt was a teacher, and they did it. Well, we asked, why would you just have, part of the ways you control a person is economically. If you have more money, then you can direct things. You can control elections. You can say where a person could live or not live. If you don't have enough money or you don't have a good enough credit score, you can't get a mortgage in certain areas. One of the films I remember seeing, even in elementary school, was a film about firefighters. There's a black and a white firefighter at the same station walking home. But when they got to a certain street, the white firefighter went this way, the black firefighter went this way, because the black firefighter couldn't go there, couldn't live in that area, okay? My grandfather brought Florida Memorial here in 1968. It opened its doors September 15, 1968. One of my neighbors now, who is white, played baseball at Florida Memorial, okay? He and I have talks. The way you get through it is you have to have conversations about it. You got to be about it. And there's a respect. He's much younger than me, but he looks up to me for a lot of stuff, okay? And so you have to be truthful. Once you're not truthful, then it's hard to believe. Let's look at the coronavirus, okay? One of the films we watched in my school was about the Tuskegee Airmen, Red Tails. When you look up the bio, there's talk about the Tuskegee experiment. Only that experiment is for pilots, not the syphilis experiment. So when we watched that film and we went over the bio, we had to print a separate bio just on the other Tuskegee experiment about the syphilis experiment. So I said, this is the reason why your parents, aunties, uncles, grandparents don't want to take this virus shot, because we've been lied to so many times, okay? The Trail of Tears, I mean, what they did to, I'm going to say Native Americans, is crazy in this country, okay? Move them off their land. We've been moved everywhere. And so when you talk about having half pay, it's because you have purchasing power greater than another people. So therefore you can do more things against another people. You can appear to be superior even though you are not. So those are the kind of reasons why. Did it make them better because they made more money? No, it did not, okay? My parents did so much in our home to set examples of what we should do or not do. It had nothing to do with money. But if you're not careful, you can say because they have a bigger house, they're better than us. They have a more expensive car, they're better than us, when in fact it's not true. So you have to have these conversations with your kids. I have them with my students, okay? Because we have to. They look up to us. They expect to hear the truth from us, whether they like it or not. Once you compromise the truth, it's hard to get it back. And so how many times have we been lied to in this country? There's no number, it's infinite. It's like the limit as it approaches infinity if I'm in a calculus class. How many times? We expect to get lied to. And that's crazy. We expect to get lied to. We have a Supreme Court judge that's right here from Miami, in the Palmetto High School. Her father's an Omega man. And so he paved the way for a lot of people he didn't even meet, okay, on a lot of different parallels. And so that's how it has to be going forward. The albatross that we wear around our neck is different. We have to carry a weight that might be unfair, but we got to carry it anyway. We have to lead a charge that might be unfair, but we got to do it anyway. And I could relate to anything in life to sports, and he could attest to this. When you become a quitter, if you quit at sports, you're probably going to quit at everything. Okay? Sports makes you have something inside you, and it's a competition that you're going to be exposed to and realize before you compete for a job, before you compete to go to a school, before you compete in anything in life, before you compete to get a loan, to run a business. It starts for so many of us. And even if you fall short, you don't have to go to the NBA or the NFL. Competition is competition. And I learned so much being an athlete, growing up, trying to beat whoever was next to me, okay? Trying to be better than the person that's next to me in class. When you compete, you compete. And so you have to compete against the establishment the rest of your life. And you can't quit because other people are relying on you. See, people like him didn't quit. And after a while, you just do it because you're there to do it. You know you're led to do it. It's like being a Harriet Tubman. She said, you don't own me, okay? These are strong people. Those people are willing, really and truly, to lose their life for a cause they believe in. That life might not be a physical death. It might be a character assassination, which can be worse. Because you have to carry around a name that somebody scarred through something you didn't even do. So we face character assassination. We face physical assassination. We face threats to our children, our family. And so I know he faced some of that.
Something I learned a long time ago. The conqueror will never tell those that he conquered how to be more powerful than him. Never. Therefore, we can no longer rely on those who have conquered us, metaphorically, to learn the lessons of how we as a community, as a black community, should get better. That's on us. I think that kind of thinking is what guided him, Judge Thomas. We can't wait for others to make us whole. That's on us. We can't wait for others to do for us what we must do for ourselves. That's on us. So this may not be as significant as you think of you and your group putting this oral history together. It's very significant. It's incumbent upon each of us, anybody in the know who have traits of Judge Thomas in our veins, to take this message forward, educate as many people as we can, starting from the young to the very old. Put whatever resources we have behind us so that it could be common, so that the conversation could be commonplace. It can't just be amongst a few of us. It's got to be not necessarily amongst all of us, but a significant part of us have to have and continue to have this conversation. That's the only way that we're going to prevail in this. We're going to have to understand that sacrifices like Judge Thomas made have to be made today. He did it in the past. We have to do it in the future. We have to come out of our comfort zone and make sacrifices, just as Judge Thomas did, so that future generations can prosper. Because if we think that this is the zenith, that this is the pinnacle, while on the other side they're trying to push us back to the 60s, the 50s, the 40s, the 30s, this is happening in real time, then we're in for a rude awakening. So my last word on this is that we take these messages forward. I know I am. I know I'm going to address, I know all of my kids on Saturday are going to know who Judge Thomas is. You understand that? So that's a blessing in itself. You understand that? All of my kids on Saturday are going to know who your group is. You understand? You know why? Because it's an example of you never give up. You never call it quit. You're an esteemed lawyer. You understand that? You could go rest on your laurels. You can go buy the biggest house in the world and drive the fanciest car in the world and just die at Martha's Vineyard anytime you get ready. You can do that. You probably still do that. But the point I'm making is the struggle still continues, and it's incumbent upon us to do what we must do to inform future generations. So I appreciate the opportunity. You can call me anytime, and praise to Judge Thomas.
I would say we have to move forward and make things in our community more actionable. Take things from off the page, off the movie screen, and put it into action, particularly in the areas of education and economics. And when I say education, I just don't mean what we learn in schools. There's so much. My family now goes on a Black History tour every summer. There's so much to be learned about what we did, how great as a people that we are. I'm not going to say were, but great as a people that we are. And we need to believe that we are a great people, a royal priesthood, and move forward. My daughters could tell you now about being financially independent. The two kind of go hand in hand. In order to move, you have to have some kind of economic power. Otherwise, we're going to get to what we talked about earlier with the schools. If you don't have money to do certain things, people will take advantage of you if you don't know things and if you don't have a resolve to do it with. Whether it's either money or know-how. He and I are both athletes, okay? We know how many, some athletes who made so much money who are now broke. Even with money, you have to know what to do with it. And so one of our tasks going forward is how do we move our people forward, individually and collectively? And I hope that one day we can come back to being how this community was. Rally around us as a people, helping one another. You know, we've heard it before, it takes a community to raise a child. In that community, we went to the doctor in the community. We went to a store in the community. We went to a club. We went to a church to make our communities whole. We often heard about the Tulsa, Oklahoma thing. It happened in more than just Tulsa, Oklahoma. Okay? There were communities that we were flooded out intentionally. We were bombed out in Tulsa. We talked about urban renewal earlier. All of these things to weaken us. But we can't let that fester and manifest itself. Else we would be worse off, continually be worse off. We have no how. We have to pull it together as a community. We can't be as divisive as we have been and let people come and put wedges between us. We have to come together as a people. And I don't know who is responsible for doing it, but it starts with each and every one of us. What we teach our kids in our houses. My brother always tells his kids, and this is crazy, but it's so real in our community. Your job is to make sure you come home safe every day. Okay? What have they put into our neighborhoods? We have to stand up and say, these things cannot be in our neighborhoods. In Los Angeles, they have rail cars that stop. They're loaded with weapons, and they keep going. They unload these weapons in our neighborhoods so we can kill each other. All this kind of stuff has to stop. It's just, we have to stand up to a lot of things that we've allowed to happen in our communities. However, we have to do that. Whether it's elected officials, whether it's community groups, whether it's pastors, whoever it is. But it starts with us as parents and teachers. We have such a great responsibility to our teachers, to our youth, to tell them about how to conduct themselves. In order to tell them how to conduct themselves, we have to conduct ourselves in a certain way, especially for our young black men. And the rate in which they are arrested. And so their arrest record tells a history about them, and hopefully that is not a part of their resume for the rest of their lives, so they could not be systematically denied a job because they have something on their record. Okay? So we have to teach more. And the task is tough, it's not easy. And it's every day, whether we want it or not. And so we need to realize that we are all in this together. And if we're not, I don't know, we're just gonna be a weakened community, and I know we're better people than that.